You're standing in the hardware aisle again, staring at a tub of floor patch that costs more than your lunch, wondering why the last one cracked in a single winter. Put it down. I did too. And what I mixed instead cost me $3, and it has held for 2 years without a single new crack. Here's what shocked me. A cement and varnish patch I made from scraps in my garage outlasted the expensive polymer repair. I paid $38 for the year before, same floor, same foot traffic, the cheap one won. This method comes straight out of old tradesman manuals from before the Second World War, back when a mason expected a floor to last a lifetime, not a season. Almost nobody uses it now because there's no money in teaching you to do it yourself. And, stay with me, because the strangest part comes near the end. There's a technique written down in a household repair guide from 1932 that I almost laughed at when I read it. It sounded impossible. I tried it anyway on a corner of my own kitchen, and I stood there staring at the result like I'd been lied to my whole life. I'll show you exactly how, and you can do it this weekend with what's already sitting in your house right now. I remember the exact moment I thought this whole thing was going to be a waste of an afternoon. I was kneeling on my cold basement floor, a cracked bag of cement in one hand, an old can of varnish in the other, thinking to myself, this is nonsense. This is going to flake off in a week. My knees hurt. The light was bad. I nearly packed it all up and drove back to the store like a good little customer, but I didn't. And that stubborn afternoon changed how I think about every repair product on my shelf. Let me take you back to where this started. It wasn't a video or a book at first. It was my own frustration. I had a concrete floor in my garage that kept opening up. Every year, a hairline crack near the door would spread. Every year, I'd buy something new. One year, it was a gray tub of ready-mix patch. The next, it was a 2-part epoxy that smelled like it could take the paint off a car. Each one promised to be permanent. Each one failed me before the next winter was over. I added it up one evening, and the number made me sick. Over about 6 years, I had spent close to $200 patching the same 3 feet of floor. $200 to fix one crack, over and over, and it was never actually fixed. I was renting the illusion of a repair. That's when a neighbor of mine, a man past 80 who used to lay floors for a living, told me I was being robbed. Those were his words. He said, "Son, before all these tubs and tubes, we mixed our own and it stayed put." He told me about cement cut with a little varnish, and something about how the old-timers sealed it so water couldn't get underneath and lift it. I nodded politely. I thought he was just an old man remembering the good old days through rose-colored glasses. But the crack came back that spring, right on schedule. So I figured I had nothing left to lose but $3 and an afternoon. Here's what I learned before I even mixed a thing, and it's the part that made me take the old man seriously. The reason your store-bought patches fail isn't bad luck. It's a real thing engineers have a name for. When you drop fresh patch material onto old cured concrete, the two don't truly become one. The new stuff shrinks a little as it dries. It pulls away from the old surface, and water sneaks into that thin seam. Then the cold comes, the water freezes, it expands, and it pops your beautiful repair right off the floor. Freeze and thaw. That cycle has been studied for over 100 years, and the Portland Cement Association documented the damage it does back in the middle of the last century. So the old floor layers weren't fools. They were solving a problem the modern tubs pretend doesn't exist. They knew that if you want a patch to last, you have to do 2 things the store never tells you. You have to help the new material grip the old, and you have to seal the top so water can never get down into that seam in the first place. That's where the varnish comes in. And that simple idea is what I set out to test. But knowing why something fails and actually fixing it with your own 2 hands are 2 very different things. Because the next question was the one that scared me. What exactly do you mix, and in what amounts, so you don't just make a crumbling mess that falls apart faster than the expensive stuff? So let me tell you exactly what I did, because the recipe is almost insultingly simple. And that was my first clue that it had been hidden in plain sight. I went to the hardware store and bought the smallest bag of plain Portland cement they had. Not the ready mix with gravel in it, just pure Portland cement, the fine gray powder. That bag cost me a little under $6, and I've used it on 3 separate jobs and still have more than half left. So for any single repair, the cement works out to somewhere around $1 or $2. Then I dug out an old can of varnish I already had in the garage, from a chair project years ago. Oil-based varnish. That's the secret ingredient the old man kept talking about. If you don't have any, a small can is a few dollars, and it lasts for years. That's how I get to the $3 figure. A real, honest $3 per repair against $30 and $40 for the branded tubs. Now here's the method, the way I finally worked it out after reading those old manuals. First, I clean the crack. This part matters more than anything you buy, and it's the step everybody skips. I took a screwdriver and an old chisel and I dug out every loose crumb inside that crack. I actually widened it a little at the bottom, so the crack was wider underneath than it was at the surface. The old masons called this keying it. You're making a little dovetail shape, so when the patch hardens inside, it physically can't lift out. It's locked in like a puzzle piece. No tub of patch can teach you that, because they want you to believe you just squeeze and walk away. Then I vacuumed it clean and I did something that felt wrong. I wet the old concrete, damp, not soaking. Because dry old concrete is thirsty, and if you put fresh cement on it dry, the old floor sucks all the water out of your new mix in seconds, and it dies before it can cure. It turns to powder. The extension services that study masonry have said this for decades. Old surface must be damp so the bond can form. I misted it with water until it was dark but not puddled. Now the mix. I put a couple of scoops of the Portland cement in an old margarine tub. I added just a little clean sand for the wider parts, though for a thin crack you can use the cement straight. Then, instead of plain water, here's the turn. I mix my water with a spoonful of the varnish stirred in first, so the whole batch carried that oil through it. I brought it to the thickness of peanut butter, not soupy, thick enough to hold its shape on the trowel. I pressed that mix down into the keyed-out crack with a putty knife hard, forcing out the air, packing it into that dovetail I'd carved. I smoothed the top level with the floor. And then the final step, the one that made the old man smile when I described it to him later. Once it had firmed up for a day, I brushed a thin coat of pure varnish over the top of the patch and a little onto the surrounding floor, sealing the whole seam under a skin of oil that water simply cannot cross. That was it. $3 of material and about 40 minutes of my time. And then came the hard part, which was waiting to see if the old man or the marketing department was telling the truth. But here's where I have to be honest with you about my doubt, because I don't want you to think I did this and skipped merrily away confident it would work. I didn't. I looked at that patch after a day, and I was sure I'd wasted my time. It looked too plain. It looked like something from another century, which of course it was. Every part of me that has been trained to trust the shiny tub with the brand name was screaming that real repairs come sealed in plastic with a price tag on them, so I decided to torture it. I wasn't going to wait a polite month. I wanted to know fast. I poured water directly onto the patch and let it sit overnight, the exact thing that destroys ordinary repairs. In the morning, dry patch, dry seam, no lifting, no dark bleed line creeping under the edge. The varnish skin had done its job. The water just beaded and sat there like the floor was laughing at it. Then winter came, the real test, the freeze and thaw that had killed every repair before it. And I want you to understand what that first spring felt like, because I walked out to that garage half expecting to see my little experiment cracked and flaking like all the others. I crouched down. I ran my thumb along the seam. Nothing. Solid. Tight. The patch and the old floor had become one continuous surface, and the crack that had come back every single spring for 6 years simply did not come back. I stood up in that cold garage, and I felt something I did not expect to feel over a floor. I felt a little bit angry, because if this works, and it so obviously worked, then I had been handing my money away for years for nothing. And that anger is worth sitting with for a second, because it leads to the real question. If a $3 mix of cement and varnish outlasts a $40 tub, then why on earth is the $3 version the one nobody tells you about? If you want to go deeper on questions like this one, I put together a book called First Fixes, and it's part of a series that goes on through deep hacks and full stack life. Each one built around the same idea you're watching right now: old knowledge that works, tested by hand, explained without anything to sell you. You'll find the details in the description below. It's the kind of reading that goes well with a Saturday afternoon and a bag of Portland cement. The answer is not a mystery once you follow the money, and this is where I stopped being polite about it. There is no profit in a bag of plain Portland cement that lasts you 3 jobs. There is no repeat customer in a repair that actually holds for a lifetime. The entire business model of the modern floor repair aisle depends on one quiet fact. The patch is designed to be bought again, not necessarily to fail on purpose. I won't claim that, but there is no incentive anywhere in that supply chain to sell you the thing that ends your need to ever come back. Think about my own numbers. $200 over 6 years for a crack that never got fixed. If the first tub had truly been permanent, they'd have earned $30-odd from me once and lost me as a customer forever. Instead, they earned it 6 times over. The failure was the feature. The old method threatens that, because the old method was invented in a world where a tradesman staked his name on a floor lasting decades, not on you coming back next spring with your wallet open. And the history backs this up in a way that genuinely surprised me. If you go back and read what people wrote about repairs before the 1950s, before the whole aisle of squeeze tubes existed, you find these recipes everywhere. Cement cut with linseed oil or varnish for a waterproof floor patch, sealing compounds you made in a bucket. Household manuals from the 1800s and early 1900s treated it as ordinary knowledge, the kind of thing every homeowner simply knew, the way you'd know how to sew a button. One of the oldest tricks in those books is the use of oil in the cement to make it shed water. There's a reason the great engineers of the 1800s mixed additives into their cement for structures they expected to stand for a century, and many of them still stand today. While my $40 patch didn't survive one winter, the knowledge was never wrong. It was just quietly allowed to disappear, because a man who knows how to mix his own patch is a man who doesn't need the store. But knowing the history only made me want to push further. Because if the old-timers were right about the crack in my garage, I started to wonder what else this same $3 mix could do around a house. And that's where the trial got interesting, because I stopped fixing one crack and started testing the limits. Now, I want to talk to you directly for a minute, especially if you're sitting there thinking this is fine for somebody with a garage and a big concrete slab. But it's got nothing to do with your situation. Maybe you rent. Maybe you're in an apartment. Maybe you're thinking you don't have cracked concrete anywhere, so this clever old trick isn't for you. Stay with me, because this next part is exactly for you, and it costs you nothing to try. You don't need a garage. You have this problem somewhere in your home right now, whether you know it or not. That chipped concrete step out front that catches your toe. The little crater in the basement floor where the washing machine sits. The gap where your garage floor meets the driveway. The crumbling corner of a windowsill made of concrete or stone. The worn threshold under a door. Even a loose ceramic tile with a hollow underneath. Every one of these is the same problem I solved, and every one of them responds to the same $3 answer. And here's the part that costs you nothing. Before you buy a single thing, I want you to do the diagnosis I wish I'd done years ago. Go find your worst spot. Get down close to it. Take a coin or a screwdriver and gently tap along the edges of any old repair or any suspicious patch you already have. Listen. A solid repair gives a sharp, tight sound. A failed one that's lifted away from the floor underneath, gives a dull, hollow knock. That hollow sound is the freeze and thaw seam I told you about, water sitting in the gap under your patch. You will be shocked how many of your existing repairs knock hollow. Mine nearly all did. That's the sound of money you already spent, quietly lifting off your floor. Then do the water test, free, tonight. Drip a little water on the old patch and the seam around it. If it soaks in and leaves a dark line creeping under the edge, that repair is finished. It just hasn't fallen out yet. If it beads and sits, it's still sealed. This tells you exactly where you need to act before the cold gets in and does the damage for you. No purchase, no specialist, just your own eyes and ears telling you the truth the store never would. I did this walk around my own home one Saturday, and I found 4 spots I didn't even know were failing. The hollow knock was everywhere. And that little bit of knowledge, that ability to hear a bad repair before it becomes a disaster, is something you now own for the rest of your life. It changes you from a customer who reacts into a person who knows. But finding the bad spots only sharpened the real question I'd been circling the whole time. I had proven the mix could fill a crack and seal it. What I hadn't tested yet was the boldest claim in those old manuals, the one I was sure had to be an exaggeration. And that's the one I saved for last, because when I finally tried it, it genuinely stopped me cold. Here is the thing that changed everything for me, and I need you to understand where I found it so you know I'm not making it up. Buried in a household repair guide printed in 1932, the kind of practical manual they used to sell for pocket change to help families get through the hard years, there's a passage about renewing a worn concrete floor, not patching a crack, renewing the whole surface. And it described something I was certain could not possibly work. The claim was this: you could take a floor that was pitted, dusty, worn down and crumbling across its whole face, and instead of tearing it out, you could bond a thin new skin of cement right over the top of the old one, so it would grip and hold as if it had always been there. Everything I thought I knew said that was impossible. A thin layer of cement over old concrete curls up, dries out, and peels like old paint. Everybody knows a feather edge of cement fails. I'd seen it fail myself. But the old manual described the trick that makes it hold, and it's so simple it made me angry all over again. Before you spread the thin new layer, you paint the old floor with a bonding slurry, a soupy mix of pure Portland cement and water brushed on like paint. And here is the key. You lay your fresh cement on while that slurry is still wet. Wet on wet. The slurry never gets the chance to become a barrier. It becomes the glue, chemically knitting the old floor and the new skin into one solid piece as they cure together. And to seal and toughen the whole thing, that same oil and varnish trick over the top once it sets. I read that and I thought, there is no way. So I picked the ugliest, most worn corner of my basement floor, a patch about the size of a bath towel that was shedding gray dust every time I walked on it. I wet it down. I brushed on that cement slurry until it was dark and glistening. And while it was still wet and shining, I troweled on a thin layer of my cement mix, no more than a 1/4 inch, feathered right down to nothing at the edges. The exact thing that always fails. Then I walked away, and I did not look at it for 3 days. Because, honestly, I didn't want to watch it fail. When I came back, I got down on my hands and knees and I braced myself for the curled, cracked, peeling edge I was sure I'd find. It was flat. It was smooth. The feathered edge that should have lifted was fused so tightly to the old floor I could not find the seam with my fingernail. I took my screwdriver handle and I tapped all across it, listening for that hollow knock of failure. Sharp and solid, every inch. A 90-year-old book had just taught me to do something the modern world insists you have to rip out your floor and pour new concrete to achieve. And the dust was gone. That corner that had been shedding grit for years was now a hard, sealed, wipeable surface. I ran my hand across it, and it was like a different floor. For the price of a few scoops of cement powder and a brush of varnish I already owned, I had resurfaced a floor that a contractor would have charged me hundreds to tear out and replace. I sat down right there on that basement floor, and I thought about my old neighbor, past 80, who'd tried to tell me all of this in one sentence and watched me nod like I knew better. He didn't read it in a book. He lived in the time when this was just what you did. He was handing me knowledge that took 3 generations to nearly lose, and I almost let it go because it came in a bag that cost $6 instead of a tub with a brand on it. That's the whole thing, really. That's what this trial taught me. The knowledge that actually lasts a lifetime was never sold to you, because a thing that lasts a lifetime can only be sold to you once. They didn't take it from you with a law or a lock. They took it by making you forget you ever knew how, one convenient plastic tub at a time. So let me leave you with what this really was. I set out to save a few dollars on a crack, and what I actually got back was the thing they've been quietly charging me to live without. The proof that the old way still works, sitting solid on my basement floor, refusing to crack, refusing to send me back to the store. Something that was taken from all of us, proven true again on a Saturday afternoon with my own 2 hands. If you're the kind of person who has always suspected that newer and pricier is not the same thing as better, then you already knew deep down that a floor was supposed to last. You were right. You just needed somebody to go dig up the recipe and test it so you didn't have to wonder anymore. Now, I want to hear from you, and I mean this specifically. Go do the tap test tonight, the one I showed you, the coin along the edge of an old repair. Tell me in the comments how many spots in your house knocked hollow. I'm genuinely curious whether yours is as bad as mine was, because nearly every patch I owned came up dead. Write it down below, the number of hollow spots you found. Don't just think it, type it, because this audience never speaks up unless somebody asks, and I'm asking. And if you believe, like I do, that this kind of practical, honest knowledge was pushed aside on purpose and deserves to be dug back up and put to the test, then come along with me. This is a place for people who test the old ways and recover what worked, instead of taking the label's word for it. Subscribe and stand with the ones who'd rather know than be sold to. Because the next thing I'm testing has been bothering me for weeks. It's an old way to stop rust on metal. A bare-bones mixture folks used before the spray cans existed. And the early results in my garage already have me questioning another shelf full of products I've been buying my whole life. I mixed the first batch 3 days ago. Wait until you see what it did overnight. I'll show you everything, and once again, you'll be able to try it yourself for a couple of dollars with what you've already got at home. Before you go, one thing. Inside my membership, the Timeless Ways Circle, I pick up right where we left off and walk you through the full cement and varnish recipe. If you get stuck, you ask me directly and I answer you myself, no robots. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. And you can cancel anytime with one click.